Welcome to Culmination, where we're not experts, but we sure have a lot to say. In the process of becoming our best self, I have with me the CEO of Designs by Gracez, none other than Zhang herself, to discuss opportunity and entrepreneurship. And with that, let's get started. So, Grace, what is opportunity?
Yeah, I think to me, opportunity is really about getting creative, and thinking outside of the box in the current situation you're in, and just trying to think about, you know, where you are now and where you want to be, and then creating those opportunities or finding opportunities to get yourself to where you want to be.
Hmm. So, is it like a situation or like an idea?
Um, I think it's a little bit of both. A lot of it can be part of your environment or your situation, but I think another half of it is also just like your mental state of, do you really believe that you can get there, and like what do you really want for yourself? I think if you can really blend the two in that case, that's when you get the best of opportunity.
Yeah, and can this work with anything? Like just any goal in mind?
Personally, I think so.
So give an example. You said personally?
Yeah, I think, let's see. I guess for me, one thing is I've already always been really passionate about fashion and just learning more about the fashion industry, and just the more I learned about it, the more I started realizing just like the environmental and ethical issues within it. And so I think at that time I was like deciding, okay, now I have all this information, what am I going to do about it? And so since this was something I was interested and passionate about, I decided to go ahead and seek opportunities where I could educate others more about sustainable fashion, as well as I then went on to create my business that we will probably talk a little more about later,
Yeah.
to really be able to achieve that goal, and taking the opportunity of having all this information that I've learned, and having the situation where I could sense that not a lot of people were super educated about this topic, and then be able to take my passion and use it for the greater good.
Yeah, that's great. Um, how about we start from the very beginning? So, what got you interested in fashion? Like the origin story.
Yeah, okay, that's it's definitely a loaded question because I think there's so many little moments that kind of have just added up over time, but I think if
Mhm.
I should pinpoint one, would be when I got my sewing machine. I just like had a bunch of old clothes, and I really loved experimenting and upcycling old clothes that I had had. And so since I kind of got into it from like a perspective of taking old things and making it into new, that was kind of also the gist of now what my business model is.
Hmm.
But so that was like kind of when I got interested in it, and I really just love like the creativity within fashion. And then in high school, I was really fortunate that we had a fashion class, and I just loved the fashion community, and it was just so fun to learn from everyone and get to see how creative and innovative everyone was. Um, and then from there, I decided to attend a fashion camp, and that's when I started really learning more about sustainable fashion. And I would say is at that camp we watched this movie called The True Cost, and that's when I kind of really started opening my eyes to all the issues within the fashion industry that I loved. And so from that point on, I started doing more of my own research and just learning more about it. And I guess you could say, to tie back into the topic, um, making the most of any opportunity I could find to be able to educate others on this topic as well as learn more about it myself.
Okay, so first off, there's a lot there, but I would first want to ask, what is sustainable fashion? Like, what do you mean by that?
Sure. I think there's a lot of ways you could define it, but I think the most like down to its core would be, you know, um, being able to recycle what's already available, and when you're creating something new, you're not. It's kind of like, I guess the best way to describe it is like closing the loop. Right now, our fashion industry is very much, you start by like creating the materials, and it's just linearly producing it, and then gets to the customers, and then once it's done, people just kind of discard it without a second thought. But instead, with
Mm.
sustainable fashion, it's more of the goal of trying to close that loop, and that once people are kind of done with the trend or they don't really want it anymore, instead of just sending the clothes to the landfills, it's getting sent to donation centers, people who sew, or even back to these companies to be recycling that fabric into creating new designs and just being able to make it all circular.
Okay, so it's sustainable in the sense of recycling, like it's forever sustainable.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a couple different avenues I've seen, but that's definitely the one that I've taken the most to.
Okay. And then next, what you were talking about was this whole idea of there's like a lot of issues there. So I'm guessing your initial interest in this subject was just, you were just interested in fashion. But is this another interest entirely? Just this idea of preserving these clothes and the environmental message?
I definitely think that's a big part of it, and I know I talked about like how I got into it from like the experimenting side, and having even though I started that way, I did still kind of learn the whole pattern making process and more of like the more traditional sewing process. But I found out that even after that whole thing, I liked the experimentation and the idea of almost kind of just like trusting the process when it came down to upcycling. And then I think with the whole environmental aspect of it, that was definitely a huge plus, and just being able to really combine those two interests was definitely, I think, really great.
Yeah. So how did you combine those interests?
Wait, could you clarify? So you're asking me like how I combine my interest for like the environmental aspect of fashion
Yeah,
with
this is kind
my
of
love
like a
for the
segue
experimentation?
to like progressing in the story. So like, you said you combined this. So how did you?
Yeah, well, I guess this kind of perfects into my business. So since I had already been just like making clothes for myself, I guess I should preface this to say that always a dream of mine to eventually like have a sustainable clothing brand.
Unfortunately, we actually lost a lot of what her story was, so let me just try to fill it in real quick. So she explains that it's been a dream of hers for a while to work on these sustainable clothes, and she mentions for a long time she would find old clothes or clothes that could be recycled or just fabric in general, and just experimenting with it, being creative, essentially recycling these clothes into making something new, something of her own. And this kind of inspired the idea of making her own clothing line that she has now. Unfortunately, with COVID happening, things got a little weird in her schedule and everything, but fortunately, it ultimately led to her considering this idea more. Sorry, we got interrupted there. And in case this part got cut out, Grace was explaining how COVID hit and she was limited with her opportunities to do the things that she wanted to do, but she ultimately took it upon herself to put her business idea into fruition. So now I asked her the question, how did you take these challenging situations, all of this? Like, it was a very uncertain time for everybody, and I'm sure you were under a lot of stress under it, and also just disappointment in general. How did you get out of that?
Um, well, I think the first thing is it's definitely okay to kind of feel those feelings of disappointment and frustration. But I think, I just kind of allowed myself to kind of let those feelings wash over me. And then as I was working through it, I think a big part of it was just like me thinking, okay, what's next? You're stuck in this time, and yeah, everything is really uncertain, but that also means is that this is the time that if you want to try something new, if you want to try something that hasn't been done before or that you were too scared to do before, I mean, there's really nothing left to lose, and you don't really have anything um, in terms of like, I guess for me personally, I'd always had like a pretty busy schedule and I enjoyed everything I did, but it was already like set in stone. So like when that was
Right.
all removed, um, I was just kind of looking at it as an opportunity to just step out of my comfort zone and try something completely different than what I'd had, and it ended up working out. So I guess that must have been a pretty good mentality to adopt.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you say that because a lot of what you do and what you've expressed is in experimentation of clothes and everything. So it's interesting how your life shifted so drastically. Like every plan you had was set in stone, but now your life became sort of mirrored by your interest. It became more experimenting. Or
Yeah, that's a
experimental.
really good perspective I hadn't thought about yet. So
There I am forgetting my vocabulary, but yeah.
all good.
Yeah, so now that you talked about kind of your mindset of getting out of there, would you mind describing your steps that you took and just kind of give me the whole story of creating this business step by step and the results?
Sure. Let's see. Well, I guess I could start with I definitely spent it wasn't just like, an overnight thing. I think it's really easy with businesses, especially established businesses, when you look on social media, you're like, "Oh, like they managed to do this so fast, like I must be able to follow that step too." But I think once I got over the fact that, what you see is just what people want to show and just like where they are in their path and kind of realizing that I had to figure out my own path. Um,
Mhm.
I spent about 2 months really just researching like what options I could take. Because originally I was thinking like if there was a way I could find like a sustainable manufacturer or like a wholesaler, maybe I could work with them on that. But then I decided like, okay, I still have this time and I did really enjoy being able like to make the clothes and having that personal touch there. So I think after those months of research and just like establishing what kind of business model I wanted to design, and then also I guess like just like the basic business logistics of setting up a website, oh my gosh, figuring out taxes. That is something I
All that
never
fun
thought I
stuff.
would be doing. Yeah. But I guess like kind of getting all those logistical things in order. And then after about 2 months, I decided to launch it. And I'll definitely say, like, now that it's been a little over a year looking back, I definitely wasn't like perfectly prepared by no means when I launched my business, but I think
Mhm.
I had done enough like of the groundwork and the foundational research that by the time I launched, I had all the necessary basics in place. And ever since, I've still been like evolving, growing, and just like kind of learning along the way with my business. So I would say
Right.
that's kind of been a little bit of the process. Um,
Yeah, and real quick before you continue, I just wanted to say that, um, it's different for everybody. Like what worked for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person. So you just kind of have to see what works for you. And also, you do have to kind of figure out the basics, but not everything is set in stone, and you can't exactly prepare for everything. Like there's going to be some uncertainty. So you kind of just have to play it by ear after that, you know?
for sure. I mean, I guess if there's one thing the past year and entrepreneurship have in common is that you just really never know when things will change. Sometimes for like really good and sometimes for not so good. But in the end, like
Yeah.
if you adopt a positive mindset and look at it from like a how can I solve this problem or where can I go next with this instead of just looking at it from face value, I think that can really help getting out of those
Yeah.
situations.
Right.
Um,
Would you like to continue? Sorry about that.
no, yeah, sure. So I think you had also asked me results, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or like where are
Okay.
you now?
Sure. So where I'm at now, it's definitely been a whirlwind of a journey, and I guess far better than I had expected because I was honestly just thinking like, if this is a bust, at least I tried. At least I could have said it worked. But like, I mean, it definitely succeeded my expectations in terms of like, just like the community I found. So I guess preface, I primarily promote my business through my Instagram and then connect it back to my website. But just on Instagram, I've been able to find more people and accounts who are also passionate about sustainable fashion and like more sustainable small clothing brands and just getting to connect with people who are like minded in that sense and getting to learn from each other
Mhm.
has been really cool and really inspiring. And then also, I think just being able to share what I love every day and be able to do that has been really exciting. And I would say since I've it's a little over a year now. I think the biggest thing for me, where I'm at, is I'm hoping to conclude the summer well and kind of figure out how I want to, I guess, almost adapt my business model when I go to college, because I'm trying to figure out like if I'll still be able to handle the workload, just because right now, being at home, it's definitely
Right.
been a little easier in that aspect. But I think overall, where I'm at right now is I'm really thankful that I've been able to make it this far, um, and for the support people have given me. And then also, I'm excited to just kind of see where the future will lead me.
Right. So, what do you do exactly on a daily for your business?
Oh, okay. So I'll be honest with you, it kind of changes. The one constant thing I do probably daily is create social media content, and connect with people on social media, whether that be potential customers or just with like other accounts I was mentioning earlier who are within the same niche as me.
Mhm.
But then it kind of changes. Apart from that, it just kind of changes on a day-to-day basis. Like some days I'll be making clothes. Today I was lucky. I had like a pretty long break in my day, so I managed to crank out three more tops.
Right.
Um,
And
but
yes,
then
you
like
make
other
your
days,
clothes yourself, right?
yeah, pretty much.
Dang.
So everything from like sourcing and just it's been really fun though, because I think one thing I also didn't really expect, of all the things like from learning throughout this process, I didn't expect that my sewing skills would also improve. So
Oh, yeah.
that was kind of a nice surprise. Um but I would say that's pretty much the main things. And then of course I try each month to do like a monthly recap of seeing like where I'm at in terms of financials, social media, and just like looking at what worked and what content may have been just better to like not be reused.
Mhm.
And then once I kind of do that reflection, I'll then also take on the next month and see like what goals do I have, or is there any like certain holidays or certain things that I should take note of, and kind of just plan around that. So I would say a lot of it's just like, I would say a lot of the time it's planning, and creating the content, and then just being able to be creative with that. And then, of course, there's the packing the orders and doing like the rest of the more business basic logistical side of it.
The fun stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. It seems like a very thoughtful approach. Like, it's not just like, "Oh, I'm in it for the money," or "I'm in it for the status or the business aspect." It seems like you're very thoughtful and constructive in your approach. Um, this is just a question, from me to you, like, just I'm curious, do you journal this stuff?
Um,
Like, your progress?
I like I wouldn't say like a formal, like when you think of like journaling, like I don't really do that, although that's been something I've been trying to get more onto, but I do think now, um with school and everything, it has been a little busier than I'd like, so like
Yeah.
I haven't had as much time to do that. But I do think like one thing I do is just, I guess, like, back to your point about being thoughtful, a lot of it's just, like, thinking almost like journaling in my head,
Mhm.
just, like, not actually writing it down necessarily, because I do agree with you, like, the number one thing when I started this business was never, like, "Oh my gosh, I need to make insane profits," or any of that, because I think, like, since this was a new venture, a new opportunity for me, I really just wanted the experience and kinda almost see where it could lead me, because,
Yeah.
the first thing I did was like accept, okay, what happens if I fail? What happens if it doesn't work out? And I was like, okay, the worst thing that happens is you're you're not fit to be an entrepreneur. Okay. I mean, like, that's okay, right? Like, at least I'll like to have figured that out. But like then thinking, okay, but what could like a good scenario be? Or like what do you hope to be? And I think like being able to make sustainable fashion more accessible, to others, as well as just being able to like help the communities around me with my business, has been really cool. So I think when I looked at it from that perspective, I think that was really what was important to me.
Right, and I think that's important for any business or just goal in general. Like, you need to know what your purpose is. Like, why are you doing this? Why do you care?
Yeah. I think one of my favorite quotes I had read was like, um, oh, I'm gonna not cite this word for word correctly, but it was something along the lines of basically like if you start a business with a purpose or a passion, like the profits and the followers and all that will come along with it. But if you start it with the goal
Mhm.
of like profits or followers, like you're just going to be like another kind of business lost in the sea, because there's nothing that really can make you stand out per se. And like, I think people can really tell that.
Right. And I remember just from my own readings and everything, it's like a good business should care about the customer and the consumer and the product itself, because if they care about that, then the money will come. Like if you care about your product and everything, then people are going to think it's a good product and they're going to be more likely to buy it or trust your brand. So it's a lot more foolproof than, oh, I just want to make this cheap product and hopefully people will buy it.
Yeah, for sure.
And you just kind of need that, you need that passion as well.
Yeah, definitely agree.
It also keeps you going.
For sure. And I think just like with passion, it's been interesting because I think, it really also develops. Like, I knew this was something I was always interested in, but the more you do it, the more you kind of it kind of just like grows on you, and you kind of start to realize things that I don't really think I could have learned just from like researching on Google, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think if I can give an example in this case. Oh, like for example, with the sewing process, specifically, I won't go into like all the jargon and like the confusing vocab with it, but the main thing was like I had always just believed, you know, even when I was experimenting, I should have to follow a certain style, or like, just do whatever's trending because that's kind of what sells. But like, I had always just loved trying new things. So I was like, well, since each closing piece is one of a kind, since like I'm upcycling it from old materials, and like actually a lot of what I do is not even taking recycled fabrics, but just taking like clothes people don't want anymore, which makes it really I guess one of a kind. And I think in that case, being able to grow that passion for experimentation, and also realizing that, being unique has kind of helped me. And even though I didn't see anyone doing it before and I was a little worried about that at first, it's kind of worked in my favor. So I definitely agree in that sense.
Right. Um, and really just not only does your passion expand, but also just think about all the ways you've grown or benefited from. And even if you mentioned a point where you're not exactly sure where this is going in terms of college, like how will it fit in? Will I have time for this? Even if you don't end up pursuing this, like what it is now, like a private business, think about all these other things you've learned about. You've learned about the business sides of things, so maybe you might want to pursue business more. You've learned how to sew way better than you ever would have. So that's a skill that you'll have for life. You've networked with a lot of people, so chances are one random rainy day, somebody might call you up and give you an opportunity. Um, and that begs a question, real quick. Um, is opportunity all luck, or do you kind of play with the odds a bit?
Ooh, that's a really great question. Um, I think I wouldn't credit opportunity all completely to luck. I do think there is like a small, like, luck does play a small factor into it, but I think a lot of it is just kind of like the little baby steps that you think may not really matter, like what you do on a day basis. Like, that's
Mhm.
kind of essentially creating those stepping stones, um, that end up leading to those doors of opportunities. I think, like, right now it may not seem like just connecting with people within my niche and getting to learn from them, and just being inspired by them and building those friendships, like, that's all genuine. But who knows, just like you're saying, maybe that ends up leading to opportunities that I can't even imagine at this moment, later down the road. And that's not necessarily, I would say, like, you could fully contribute to luck, but more of like, if you practice, these daily habits of thinking about where you want to be, and like what you can do to get there, or just like what small things you can change in your life, that could even just really help you open those doors, I think.
Right. I mean, I personally believe if your mindset is always thinking like that, like thinking constructively, thinking about where you're going, just kind of being thoughtful in the whole approach, like taking note of what worked and what didn't, and just networking with everybody. opportunity probably isn't luck if you think about it, because the more you do that, the more that the chances just roll in your favor. So it's still chance, but because you essentially fix the game with your good attitude and everything,
Yeah.
is it luck? Like, how can you say that's luck if you can actively change the hand of fate manually?
That's a really good point. And I think that's really like that's why I wouldn't say like you couldn't fully credit opportunities to luck, but it's kind of like I think everyone has certain moments in their life where they're like, "Oh, like I can't believe that happened. Like it all ended up aligning perfectly." And in that
Right.
moment, it can really feel a little bit like luck. And like sometimes I do think it could play a small factor, but like just like you were saying, in the general scheme of things, like there were definitely small things you did leading up to that kind of helped you
Mhm.
realign it and make it really all just work out. And I think also with like on the topic of luck and opportunity, um,
Yeah.
I think part of it is also if you okay, I think this actually can go two ways. But like when you're looking for opportunities, you may sometimes miss one that you weren't looking for, if that makes
Mm.
sense, in terms of like you're so actively searching for this one opportunity you believe like is going to end all be all that you might miss the one that actually is like the right fit for you.
Yeah.
But then also on the flip side of it is like sometimes it's when you're not actively seeking out opportunities and you're just trying to work on improving yourself and work on following your passions, and that's when those opportunities kind of end up coming to you, or you end up like finding them without intentionally looking out for them.
Why does this sound like dating?
I mean, hey, we're talking about opportunity. I guess like you can apply it to your life in any aspect of however you want to apply it.
Right. I mean, you're just like explaining these, and it's like, like you have this one perception of the person you want to meet in your life, and then you miss out on the person who's probably best for you, who was right there. I don't know. It just kind of reminded me of some sitcoms I've watched.
Casey, you're about to like go write a new movie, just like take the storyline and run with it.
Yeah, basically. But anyway, I mean, that is a form of opportunity. Like we've been focusing on a lot of the business aspects, but opportunity can be really anything. It can
Yeah,
be opportunity for higher learning or meeting a partner or I don't know. Uh,
I
it
guess just
really
really like what you decide to make of it. Like, right? Like if everyone you're an individual, you're unique and you've got your own path your life, like depending on what kind of opportunities you're seeking or just like what you want for yourself. That's kind of like I guess how you can go about searching or kind of working towards for those opportunities.
right. And kind of moving on, I thought about this. Back to your business and everything and your experiences. Have you ever reached a point of having to make a decision of an opportunity cost?
Hmm, let me think for a moment. Um
Like that big crossroads moment?
I I guess if I'm being really candid here, I did get to one point where it was like it was kind of it wasn't in the super super early stages. I would say it's about like maybe like a quarter of the way in, and I was just like starting to doubt myself like whether or not I could actually do this. Like I was getting support, but like I think I had set my
Mm,
expectations. I had like set low expectations, but then I kind of started succeeding them, so then I like kept setting higher expectations, and then when I started like to miss those higher expectations, I started like kind of questioning like, oh, like before I was succeeding them, like is there something wrong? Like maybe is this like telling me that I shouldn't be doing this anymore? Um,
right.
but I think at that crossroad, I guess you could call it, I decided like instead of full on like, oh, I'm gonna give up. Like I didn't want to do that right away yet. I decided to do like I paused my store for 2 weeks, and during that 2 week time, I was still promoting creating content on social media and like keeping up with the day to days that I was explaining earlier. Um, but the one thing when I paused my store, I was that was when I like really sat down and started thinking, you know, like, where do I want to take my business, and also kind of redefining what, like, really narrowing down what my specific mission was, what my goals are, and like kind of almost creating, like, I had a business plan, but almost like going back to that business plan and cleaning it up after having that experience. And I think doing that was really refreshing and really helpful, because I think not only did that kind of help remotivate me and like assure me that, like, oh, I can do this. It's okay that, like, it's sometimes things aren't going to work out perfectly to my timeline. And I mean, that's really just entrepreneurship and life for you.
Right.
But also just I think that's also when I started seeing more growth in my business, because when I figured out what I really, really wanted, and was really able to just narrow that down, I think people could tell that, and that really helps you just solidify yourself within your niche.
Yeah. And do you think business, like just in the whole process, do you think it grows on a linear scale or an exponential scale?
Hmm. I think it's different for everyone, that's for sure, because I kind of depends on, like, you know, what industry you're in, or like, have you had prior experience before and stuff like that. But
True.
I think in my case, it's actually still been relatively linear. Like, I haven't had one of those, oh, you went viral on TikTok or Instagram and now you have like 100,000 followers. Like, we did not have one of those moments that some businesses do.
Right.
But
Which
I do
could be an
think, like,
aspect of luck.
yeah, and but I also think, though, part of it is like, it really just, if you focus on your own journey and like remember like what your purpose is, like, it all really ends up working together, because I think there's benefits to both, right? Like with the exponential, that really kind of, it's like a kickstart. It really, like, I think it truly would motivate people, and you want to like keep up the momentum from there. But
Yeah.
at the same time, though, like, if you're unable to keep up the momentum, like, that can be really difficult if you have that. So like in that case, like, a linear model can be almost better, because you're keeping like really consistent steady growth. And also, I think the thing I liked about having more or less of, at least in comparison to the exponential model, more of a linear growth model, is being able to really connect with people and like thinking long term and like sustaining those relationships, instead of just being like, oh, you're just like another number on my social media or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see how like exponential growth could feel inflating or something, or even make you lose your initial purpose just because it's like, oh yeah, I'm popular now. I made it to the big leagues. Now I don't have to care anymore.
Yeah. Although I also want to preface to say, like, I guess I know I said it earlier, but it really is like, for some people it works. And like, if that,
Hmm.
you know, whether it be luck or whether it just be like something that you don't really see like all the tries beforehand, you just kind of see like them going viral. So like in that case, like, I would commend them. Like, that's really great, because there's a lot of things, I think sometimes with business, maybe it is a little bit of both, in terms of like, you're growing linearly, and then all of a sudden you do get a little bit of an exponential jump, but then you do some more linear. Like, I think it kind of just depends for everyone.
Right. And something I like about the linear kind of approach, because it's similar with this podcast, it's just like it's kind of nice to see this like growing step by step community that you have, or like I guess more people are listening. Um, I don't know. It just, you know exactly where you are. You don't exactly know where you're going in terms of results, but like you have a plan, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And you kind of just adapt like that. Um, I don't know. And I bet that's the same for you, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Um, and I think you're definitely right in like the step by step aspect of it. I think that's really cool. And just being able to see the growth over time, because I think it, I mean, not to sound cheesy, but it's kind of a lot like life. Like, when people say like you're growing a business, but also like you with your podcast, or like even just, I think of like athletes, like them honing their skills within their sport, or just really anyone pursuing their passion projects, being able to see how you've improved over time, as well as being able to really like improve that craft and seeing like how others are receiving it, like that's really cool for sure.
Right. I mean, for me, it's really neat to see how my communication skills have been better. I mean, sometimes I overthink things, so then I stumble like an idiot, but I mean,
All
overall, I
good.
think I've really come a long way. What was that?
You cut out on the last part. I heard stumble, and then I didn't really catch the last part.
Oh yeah, I was like, sometimes I stumble on my words like an idiot if I think too much about what I need to be saying or something. I'm the kind of guy that if I think about exactly what I'm doing, I can't do it anymore.
I mean, I think that's like for a lot of people though. Like I think, or maybe it's just like us overthinkers, right? But it's kind of like
Yeah.
the idea of like if you're we all know how to breathe as humans, right? But like the minute you
Mhm.
start thinking about like, oh, how do I breathe, or like how do I explain to someone how to breathe, like
That's my
no,
favorite magic
that would
trick.
just not work.
My favorite trick is you are now manually breathing.
There you go.
There you go. Now we're both cursed. Um, but anyway, I remember. So I originally came to you with this idea. First of all, I wanted you on the show, so I came to you with a different idea. But then, as soon as I did so, I told our mutual friend Regan that I was gonna have you on, and then she was like, "Oh, you could talk about her business," and I was like, "What business?" Like, I just had no idea. And then when she like sent me pictures and described it, I was like, "What? What?" Like seeing people like wearing your clothes, I could only imagine how crazy that would feel to like think like I did that.
Yeah, it's definitely surreal. I think um it's just kind of like, one, you can't deny there's a little pride there just knowing like, okay, like people love this just as much as I love it. And I like, that's like something I just think is so exciting, right? To know that like you're not only able to
Right.
share what you love, but that other people love it just as much too. Um
I mean, you've
and
earned it, you know?
thank you. It's still a little surreal to me, I suppose, but
It's
I guess
surreal to me, you know? Like I
yeah.
I remember we were in Chinese class together freshman year, and I just remember looking over and you were just like drawing like a picture of a dress on a sketch pad. Like just drawing that. So I knew you were into fashion. Like I remember you talking about the classes and everything, but I just remember you doodling that and then hearing 4 years later like, "Oh yeah, people are just walking around wearing your clothes." I'm like, "Okay, I'm not gonna say that this is like completely out of left field, but like, whoa, you know? This is
Yeah.
crazy."
I mean, I guess just tying it back in, you that was kind of just me like adapting, the common thread is fashion, this love of it, but like adapting as the years have gone on, like in what I want to do. Like it started with actually Designs by Gracez for like about 9 months was a sustainable fashion blog. But then I like loved educating, but like I also, that's when I started really getting more into the sewing process too.
Yeah,
And then like I know I talked like when quarantine and COVID hit, just having the free time and being cooped up at home all the time, like being able to adapt and just seizing that new opportunity, like, okay, this isn't really what I expected, but I mean, it's cool and it's something that I would enjoy doing. So like why not, right? So I think part of it
right,
is just being willing to adapt as things, environments, situations change, but also getting creative with it, because sometimes it's not about like, had I really decided to end up following like my 2 year, 3 year plan, I probably would not be where I am right now. And maybe that would have been a good thing, maybe that would have been a bad thing, but like I'll never know because I decided to take this path. And I think um there is kind of this freedom in knowing that even though you are stepping out of your comfort zone or trying something that you didn't think you could do before or that you didn't think of before, there
mhm.
is the freedom of like, okay, well, why not? Like you can completely make it your own and you can get creative with it. So
Yeah, it's kinda like flexible structure, as much of an oxymoron as that sounds.
There you go. A very good
Right.
description of it.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say this real quick. Like your successes that you've had, the profit, and just seeing people wearing your stuff. It is very like flattering, I bet. But also it's like you're very happy about that. And you should feel good about the rewards. But what I admire about your approach and everything is that that's not what this is all about. Like this is a bonus and it's really nice and we need to celebrate sometimes. Like who doesn't love a celebration, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean your purpose is still the same and you're not going to be affected by this. Like sometimes people can see these rewards and feel blinded by it and completely lose hand of the wheel.
Yeah, and I think that's like why it really just boils down to like specifically with business, starting with that purpose and that passion, but regardless of like if it's in business or whatever field, industry, or just thing you want to pursue new opportunities in, if you can go in with like a really clear of like knowing what's your why, or even if you're not 100% sure yet, just like something as simple as I want to try something that's out of my comfort zone. If you can kind of define and continually define, what do you want to get out of something and why do you want to do it, I think that can really keep you set on the path and focused on that purpose instead of just, like you were saying, getting blinded by everything else.
Right. It's just a bonus. It's not what this is all about.
Yep.
Yeah. So let me see if I have any more questions because we're kind of heading towards the end here. You said you have to go like at 40, right?
Yeah, so like in about 5 minutes.
Okay, then we can just shorten it. What do you think is the big lesson here? Like, what do you want our viewers to hear?
Ooh, that's definitely a loaded question since I feel like we've covered some pretty great stuff in this past time. But I think if I could leave our listeners with one main message is the encouragement and reminder that you're your own unique individual, you're set out on your own individual path, and don't be afraid to get creative, step out of your comfort zone, and seek opportunities that you never thought you would do, because I think sometimes it's really when you are in an environment that you hadn't expected, that's when really great things can come out of it.
Right. And I guess I'll add, like, it's always good to have a plan. It's always good to think about what's important to you and what you want to do and what your interests are. But also don't be afraid to be flexible sometimes because life isn't stagnant.
For
Now,
sure.
you shouldn't just... Yeah, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, if there's anything this past year has taught us, life definitely is not stagnant.
Right. But I mean, on the contrary to that, if you don't have any structure, then you're going to feel lost and not exactly know where you're going.
True. So it's just about finding that balance.
Right. It's what it's all about. So anyway, thanks for coming on here, Grace.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Casey. I'm excited. You've done a great job with this podcast so far.
Thank you. Would you like to do a little plug before we end things off?
Sure, why not? So I guess for anyone who is interested in checking out my work, my Instagram handle is at Designs by Gracez, and then I'm also at Designs by Gracez on YouTube if you want to look up some easy beginner sewing tutorials. And then my website is designsbygracez.com.
Okay, sounds great, and I'll put it in the description as well.
Awesome, thank you.
So yeah.
Thank you so much, Casey.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.